Hello everyone, welcome along to another image review session. This is in mid-July 2023 and I've got a batch of new pictures processed from my recent Red Sea trip. This is kind of the second installment of Red Sea photos. I'll definitely have another one, possibly another two of these, depending on how much time I get to process pictures before I'm off on my next shoot. The Red Sea is always very productive, but I don't always process lots of pictures from the Red Sea simply because it's a destination I've been to lots of times, and obviously there's some repetition in the subject matter, so there's less of a demand to process the pictures. Although when I go there, I always try and shoot predominantly different pictures, and certainly I'm more interested in processing the pictures that add to my portfolio rather than simply repeat what I've done before. And the good thing with coral reefs is there's such biodiversity, there's always another species to shoot or another behaviour to capture. So these pictures are all from the recent Red Sea trips I've done at the end of June, beginning of July 2023, all taken with the Sony A1 camera, Nauticam housing, Retra flashes. But a variety of different lenses here. So I'll run through these. This first shot, actually, you'll see all the EXIF data on the right, so you can read that off. So I won't pause too much on it, but I won't comment too much on it. But this first one is quite interesting. Shot with the Nikon 60mm lens on the Sony camera, and using the curved 4-inch port from Nauticam. And I really like using a curved macro port with my 60mm lens. And this is just a shot of a crocodile fish, shot relatively open aperture, to give this shallow depth of field look. Some people obviously don't like shots like this where the nose of the fish is out of focus, but I think it gives the picture, particularly combined with an out of focus background, a great feeling of depth, which I think it says an interesting story about the crocodile fish as well, being sort of such a long flat creature. So I rather like this composition. Okay, next shot is a lionfish, also taken at the Barge wreck. This is a wide-angle shot with the Nauticam FCP lens. For those that haven't watched the previous video in this series, the FCP is currently a prototype, but it's a new correct conversion port, so sort of underwater corrected wide-angle port from Nauticam that takes a standard lens and turns it into a fisheye zoom. The FCP standing for Fisheye Conversion Port, rather than something cool port, as some people have been calling the FCP, because it is a very, very likable optic. Anyway, that lionfish shot just shot with a tickler flash against the silhouette of the reef, of the side of the Barge wreck, and there's actually a you can see there's a dive boat Zodiac above it as well in the background, and a few of those whitetail squirrelfish in the background too. Then a classic subject from the Barge in Little Goobal Island are these tiger cardinal fish with their great big teeth, and the males of this species incubate eggs in their mouth, and you can see all the eggs here inside the mouth of the tiger cardinal there, and also through its, see, it can't zoom properly, through the skin underneath its mouth here, right down inside their thing. So they produce a lot of eggs, and these are a couple of different shots of them, one photographed against a sort of a blurry reef background. I really like the depth of field in this shot. I think it works really, really nicely. It's just a standard shot, but just I think the depth of field is a very pleasing background, nice foreground. And this picture here, the same fish, or the same type of fish, framed this time against blue water. I often find early in the morning when we stay overnight at the Barge and we go in first thing in the morning, you often get the males up more in the water column, and you get the chance to shoot them more on blue or black backgrounds if you want those for the shots. And in this case here, I wanted a blue background. It's probably quite a long exposure early in the morning to get the blue. So this is, 25th of a second, making use of that in-camera image stabilization to get a nice clean picture of the 25th of a second. And I could have bumped the ISO up, but I just carried on at the ISO 200 because I was quite happy with it. Now moving on to the Thistlegorm wreck, and a couple of shots there taken with the EMWL lens. the bug eye lens using the 90mm Sony lens, but with the bug eye lens on the front. And this picture here is a crocodile fish, just a nice portrait of the crocodile fish with a flavour of the wreck in the background. And that's what I went down to get on this dive, was to get some marine life shots from the Thistlegorm wreck to add to all the many other shots I have from the Thistlegorm. But I wanted the shots to always have a flavour of the wreck in them as well. I didn't want them just to be purely marine life shots. This photo, probably not many people will like, but I really like it. I find it very interesting and different. This is a photo of a sergeant major, a male sergeant major, nesting. And this male sergeant major is trying to clear away from his nesting area my camera lens. And he's doing that by reversing into it and trying to swoosh it away by moving his tail to swoosh the water away and swoosh the object away from his nest. And I really like the effect that you've got this sort of translucent look through that tail fin. I think it's actually created by the movement of the tail fin after the flash has gone in this exposure. That gives it that translucent look, and you can see through the tail fin and see the wreck beyond, which I really like. And that was something I was going for on this dive, was to get the wreck as part of these wide angle macro shots. One thing I would say about this is one of the challenges with using the EMWL is you always have quite limited depth of field, particularly when you focus close. And as a result, you need to shoot the lens quite stop down. If we look at the settings of these, this one is at f16 and this one is at f18. And the problem with shooting those very shut apertures is you run out of ambient light. So when I have the choice, I will always try and shoot the EMWL towards the middle of the day to get the maximum amount of ambient light. And obviously, if it's not Egypt where it's always sunny, I'll wait for it to be sunny to use that lens, because it makes it easier. Because even in sunny Egypt, even in the middle of the day, working at f16 at relative depth on the Thistlegorm, I'm up at an ISO of 640, and I'm eking out shutter speeds of a 20th and a 13th of a second to make these pictures, to get those backgrounds to show up. It's very easy to use the EMWL and shoot with fast shutter speeds and get a black background, but I want that background to be part of my wide angle macro shots. So trying to use that lens in the best possible conditions makes quite a big difference. Now on to Ras Mohammed, and this is a shot again with the FCP of a school of snappers, a really big school of snappers out in the blue. And I just like this picture because it was a really good shape, a kind of quite a good circular shape of the school as it moved out away from the reef in the blue. And it's just worth a quick mention for those that aren't familiar with this species that they are really large fish, up to almost a couple of feet long, or a couple of feet long, sort of 60, 70 centimetres, and a very long-lived fish too. I think the record age for one of these that's been aged, and actually not many of them have ever been aged, I think is something like 90 years old. So some of these fish I've probably been photographing for the last 25 years as part of this aggregation in the Red Sea, which is quite a cool thought that these fish are so long-lived. And possibly in the Red Sea, they live even longer, actually, because the cooler water temperatures in the winter there are likely to mean that they have longer lifespans than they do in the place where the study was done, which was in tropical water. I think in New Caledonia, but I don't remember now. Anyway, right, on to another fish portrait. This is shot with the 90mm macro lens, and a shot of a Red Sea Picasso triggerfish. An interesting species, and I particularly like shooting these guys around dusk. They always seem to be very active at dusk, often pairing up and the pairs displaying to each other and swimming around. I don't know if it's when they sort out all their territorial disputes, but I always notice on dusk dives or late afternoon dives that they're a particularly active fish. This one here shot with a longest exposure, but I quite like that little bit of movement on him of a 13th of a second to burn in that blue background. But yeah, I like a little bit of movement in these shots. I think if you're these days, a too perfect fish portrait almost just looks a little bit lacking life. And so I quite like a little bit of movement, a little bit of blur around the subject, just to give, you can see the fins are blurring up here and that sort of thing. And I think that just gives the picture a nice feeling, a nice flavour to differentiate it from just, the perfection that we can so easily do. Right, back to the reef and a wide angle shot. I don't remember what lens that one's shot with. That's shot with the fisheye, with the 8-15 Nikon fisheye in this case. Oh yes, I remember why, because when I were at Ras Mohammed, that was where I was lending people the FCP, so particularly on this first trip, there are hardly any FCP shots from Ras Mohammed, because the FCP was busy on other people's cameras. But just a nice little, this is near Alex's Bommy, for those that know Alex's Bommy, around the back of Yolanda Reef, which is a little outcrop that I shoot repeatedly because it's just so photogenic. And this is just a kind of a little bit of reef that's attached to that Bommy. And it's just such a beautiful area because it has lovely soft corals. It's shallow. It usually has good viz through that area. Lots of anthias. And because it's shallow, you can work in nice sunlight, surface textures, background reefs. It's just a very nice spot for wide angle with all the right ingredients, all concentrated in a very small area. Back onto the outside of Shark Reef now, and a big school of snappers moving through. Always impressive when these schools begin to move and all these fish charge along the reef. Really impressive sight. They, as I said before, they are big fish. Now some macro shots from around Shark Reef. This is a photo of a honeycomb rabbitfish. You don't see a lot of pictures of rabbitfish, particularly the fox-faced rabbitfish, I have to say. You hardly ever see underwater photos of those. And I think they're a little bit ignored by photographers. And this is a nice honeycomb rabbitfish. They do have a lovely texture on them with this honeycomb pattern. If you just load it up, I mean, they are a beautiful, beautiful fish. But this one here was being seen out of its territory by a damselfish. And I was really pleased with how quick the Sony camera is for capturing these sort of instantaneous behaviors that aren't going to be repeated. And they are just kind of grab shots. But I really like how quickly that camera focuses, and I always struggle to get this type of shot with my previous cameras. The other thing I've enjoyed about the Sony, particularly for fish portraits, is there were always kind of, I guess you'd call them bogey subjects for the SLR cameras. Fish that they didn't like to focus on, and parrotfish, particularly the greener parrotfish, were a classic example where SLRs would really struggle to pick them out and focus on them. Another bogey fish was the sort of very dark green birdmouth wrasse, which again was always hard for the camera to focus on. One of the things I like about the sensor-based autofocus on the mirrorless cameras is that they definitely focus a lot more easily onto some of these more problem fish. So, and if you've been watching these videos for a while, I've got a thing about getting nice photos of parrotfish, another fish that I feel is very ignored by underwater photographers. This is a rare sight certainly on coral reefs in the Red Sea, a bit more common on the muck sites. This is a Red Sea soapfish. Not a fish many people have seen. This one was just posing nicely in a cave at Ras Mohammed, and so gave me a chance just to grab a few shots of this as a portrait, just because it's a fish I don't see too much in the Red Sea. Nothing particularly remarkable. Shot with quite an open aperture to blur that background. It was kind of in a cave. I was never going to get a great background on it, so shallow depth of field was really my only solution for this guy. These next two shots are, next two or three shots are a little bit more interesting technique-wise, because they're taken with the Nikonos 15mm, so that's the mechanical Nikon rectilinear wide-angle lens. It's a 15mm, but it's actually, in terms of field of view, it's equivalent to a 20mm lens, and an underwater lens that many people will be familiar with from their Nikonos 5. And you can use it on any of the mirrorless cameras pretty easily, as long as you have the right adapter for it. And in fact, the adapters were made when the very first sort of mirrorless housings came out 10, 12 years ago. I quite enjoy using this lens. It's often lauded as the best ever lens optically underwater. I really don't see any difference in performance between this and any other good underwater lens, like say the WACP or a good fisheye or something in terms of sharpness. It's very good, but it's not. I don't really notice any exceptional nature over other very good underwater lenses. It does a good job. Obviously, being a mechanical lens, it's a bit clunky to use, so I'd never consider it a frontline lens. But in a place where I've shot lots of times, it is fun to take something different down. It's not especially wide, But that's quite nice to vary my portfolio a little bit and get some pictures with a slightly different look. So because it's small and light to travel with, it's only, it's a relatively easy lens to put in my in my bag for trips. And I think it's a lens I'll continue to use because I really enjoy using it. This is a group of Anthias shot with it. There's no aperture settings on these because the camera is automatic, but I was generally shooting it around an indicated f11. Maybe if it's a close focus shot, maybe a touch more shut down than f11. But that seems quite a nice place to shoot it. And now moving over to a lens with a similar angular view, but a little bit more user friendly. And that is using the Sony 28-60 behind the WWL 1B lens, the WWL, and that turns the 28-60 into a 130 degree wide angle lens. A very nice angular view, and obviously you can zoom as well. So a very usable lens. And actually, I think this was probably my best dive of the trip. Certainly on the reefs, where just everything was just spectacular. The water was really nice visibility, the schools were lined up, the reef was looking superb. It was all going off, and it was absolutely spectacular. This is on the edge of Shark Reef with just schools of fish everywhere. You've got the soft corals and the Anthias on the reef here. In the foreground, or the middle ground below, at the bottom right of the picture, there's a school of yellow spotted trevally. Behind them, you can just about see a swirl of big eye trevally, and then the main school in this picture is the big aggregation of boha snappers. So a really, really spectacular scene with it all going off. And this just captures how wonderful these dives can be. And actually, this was also my 150th dive of the year. So it was probably the best dive of the trip, and also sort of a landmark for my year as well. So it all came together on that dive, and I really enjoyed shooting the WWL. This is still the same dive. The reef was just looking spectacular. The Anthias all out, swimming in the current. Beautiful blue water washing through the reef. All the soft corals out. Everything alive. Just a real privilege to be diving in those conditions. And sometimes wide angle photography is like that on a trip, in that you shoot similar shots dive after dive, using the same techniques, finessing those techniques, thinking about the types of compositions you want to take. And then there will be a dive during the trip where just the light, the visibility, the current all just come perfectly together, and the reef just looks 20% more beautiful. And that's often the dive where you get a huge number of returning shots. And I've still got lots more to process from this same dive, where everything seemed to be lined up for me all dive, and it just was so productive. I'm not sure I think this might now be the next dive. If we escape out of that, I can have a look at the lens. Yeah, so this is the next dive now, shot with the fisheye. The snapper's still nicely lined up. Nice sort of triangular shape school in this frame. Nice to see, and obviously great detail in on the fish with the lens that's zooming into 200%. Oh, it's not loaded up now. I have to click back out and zoom back in again. Yeah, but yeah, the snapper's looking really, really nice. Lots of great detail coming through on the fish. Right, let's keep motoring on. There's quite a big collection this week. This is a macro shot of a blue spotted stingray, a common Red Sea subject. And because of their graphic nature of their patterns, that I find that they're always a species I enjoy to play with compositionally. They're fun to shoot the whole animal, but I think even better to shoot details of them. Then some cleaner shots. I spent a bit of time one evening on a cleaner station. I particularly like doing cleaning stations in the evening. I think a lot of fish come in and get a final clean for the day, so there can be good activity going on. And this pair of fish were really interesting because they were really active, but they were hardly picking anything off the fish. What the cleaner Ras were doing on all the fish was rubbing themselves on the fish. And the fish seemed quite happy with this. So it does show that there's clearly a strong sort of massage/tactile element to what draws fish into cleaning stations. Because these wrasse weren't picking any parasites with their mouths. They were simply rubbing themselves on the other fish, and the fish were queuing up for this and enjoying the service. You can see here this sulphur damselfish. The cleaner wrasse are just rubbing themselves along the top of it. And they continued to do this with multiple fish through this evening session. Which was really interesting to watch, but it definitely to me indicates that part of what pulls fish into cleaning stations is also that there's clearly a you know, that the touch is something that pulls them in, as well as, you know, the proper cleaning of the parasites. This is a scissor-tail sergeant major, just up swimming in front of the evening light, dappling on the surface. I really like the background in this shot. The fish is fine. I took a number of these shots, and this one, obviously, the fish is eating or yawning, and it's got a cool mouth expression. But it's really the background that drew me to this opportunity. Normally, I would do this with high-speed sync, but on this particular dive, the 400th of a second shutter speed from the A1 was enough, actually, so I didn't need to use high-speed sync for this shot, which was quite cool. Shot at f3.5, the open aperture gives me those bokeh patterns from the sunlight in the background, and obviously shooting an open aperture into the sun, it's very bright, so I have to use a base ISO of ISO 50 and a very fast shutter speed of 1/400th, which is the sync speed on the A1, to control that ambient light. Right, back to the barge, and here are some EMWL, so some bug eye shots of a handsome, pretty shaggy looking reef stonefish with this great big frowning mouth here. And this is the same fish, just shot from the side. It was actually moving in this shot, so it's actually sitting a bit more proud of the sediment than it normally would. You can see its pelvic fin down here at the bottom, coming out of the side. I presume it's its pelvic fin. I've never really examined stonefish too closely to sure if it. I think it's the pelvic fins on the bottom that it's sitting on there. I'm not quite sure if they have pectoral fins. I don't really see any. Anyway, this was a nice little guy, and then some more EMWL shots, probably from the same dive. This is a pair of Red Sea two-banded anemone fish in their anemone. I like the facial expression on the foreground one, and then some macro and super macro from that same site. This is a blue belly blenny portrait shot coming out of the reef. They're often of shallow water species, much smaller than you'd imagine the blue belly blenny. This is a shot taken at sunrise, I would guess, maybe sunset. I don't remember now. Using the Trioplan 100mm lens. I think sunset. I think I put the Trioplan on for a quick dip at the end of the day, making use of the fact that we had an open deck policy on the boat, so you could just pop back to the boat, make a camera change and jump back in. I don't think I bothered getting the tank refilled because it was a shallow, easy dive, so just went back in did 20 minutes, half an hour with the Trioplan just to get some shots with it. I'm still not completely happy with my setup for the Trioplan on the Sony. I feel that the frame is a little bit tighter than I would like, and I need to have a fiddle around with the setup for it just to get a slightly bigger picture area. I felt that I didn't have quite enough negative space. This is obviously a bigger fish than I might normally shoot, but it felt like I just wanted another sort of 20% more picture area. So I'm going to fiddle around with my Trioplan setup before I next use this lens in anger. This picture is on the morning dive now, yeah, so that makes sense. So this is a morning dive, high-speed flash sync. I'm not sure how fast, and it's shot on a 400th actually. They also had enough shutter speed in the A1, just using the native shutter speed to get these morning sunlight bokeh patterns. This is a yellow patch damsel and a white bellied damsel. Just damselfish are reliable fish for shooting bokeh shots because they'll swim up into the water column and be fairly confident in themselves, so you can frame them against these backgrounds. There's often prettier fish around, but they tend to hug the seabed a bit more, so quite a lot of my bokeh shots have got damselfish in because they're the ones that they're quite protected from predation because of their tall, thin bodies and those spiky dorsal spines that you can actually see very clearly in all three pictures. That make them not very palatable to predators, so they feel reasonably protected, I think, and happier to go out. A lemon yellow goby, coral goby. This was this one here was posing in his coral, nice and easy to shoot. I normally shoot these with longer lenses than the 90mm Sony, but I don't have a longer macro lens at the moment. I'd prefer to use something like 150mm lens for these. It just means you've got a bit more working distance. You can really fill the frame with them if you want to. You can do tighter shots of the face because they are just, beautifully coloured fish with their lovely yellow bodies and the shape in their fins. This is an EMWL shot of a moray eel. This was just sticking out of the reef, and I just put the EMWL on to the camera and just basically pointed it at the moray and was able to get this frame, trusting the A1's autofocus just to nail it. It's a way I'm shooting. I'm probably going to shoot the EMWL quite a lot more on reef dives. Is carry it in my pocket, and if I find a subject, just put it on without the relay on. It means that in the viewfinder the image is reversed and upside down, so it's quite hard to aim up through the camera, but just shooting it blind can often yield some really nice shots with relatively minimum work, and you're just trusting the camera to nail the focus, which it does. So it's an easy way to shoot it. Some anemone fish portraits. This was a very nice anemone fish. It was very light in colour, didn't have a lot of dark pigment on, so I concentrated on this individual quite a lot. Here's one of him barking a warning to me, or her barking a warning to me. And now back to the Thistlegorm again with the EMWL1. This one shooting a small scale scorpion fish just resting on the reef, and that's the bridge behind him. There's always quite a lot of predatory fish on the Thistlegorm, because during the night a lot of the schooling fish like the fusiliers come down and rest on the reef, on the wreck, and I think the predators gather to munch on them, particularly around hold 2. In the early morning or late in the evening you'll find a lot of predators, and then in the broken area of hold 4 is where you'll find sort of crocodile fish in particular. Some more Thistlegorm shots. This one's with remote strobes. Inside, I'll show you some settings because we've been whizzing through a few. So there's some settings if anyone's interested. Now back into Thistlegorm. These are some remote strobe shots with the AM463 Albion trucks, which were the Zwicky aircraft refueling trucks. And there's 3 of them in a row here on the wreck, and I've got remote strobes in these 2 cabs just to make a nice portrait, a nice picture of them. It's not, I don't think, the perfect composition, but it was just this, I'm right in the corner there. There's no more room for manoeuvre. I need a wider lens and a fisheye. And then this is a slightly tighter shot. One of the nice things of having the FCP lens is I could zoom in a little bit, just fill the frame. It's the same remote strobe setup, but a different composition using it. And having gone to the effort of setting up a remote strobe setup, I always want to make the most of it. One thing I would comment on here is that I remembered on this occasion to set my closer remote strobe, so the one in the near truck, a couple of clicks power lower than the further one, because I knew that further one would be dimmer from being further away in the final picture. And I think it's got me back to a pretty balanced exposure between the two. And now, just coming back up on top of the wreck, it's an early morning dive, so the predators were hanging around looking for stray fusiliers, and this is a crocodile fish lying on top of a plate coral growing on top of the Thistlegorm wreck. And I like this shot a lot because I think it gets those elements that I want in an animal shot on the Thistlegorm. It's got the main subject doing something, the predator lying in camouflage, but you've really got a strong feeling of wreck from the background of this picture. And then you've even got a predatory jack hunting fusiliers in the background. So it's got a great story, this picture. Right, back onto the reef. This is a long one, I'm sorry. We're still chugging through these. A classic soft coral reef shot, framing the soft coral against the silhouette of the reef, getting a real punch of colour. Another reef shot, shooting the Antheus here against the reef. Well, it's the last couple of pictures, making use of the 1/400th sync speed of the A1 again to really be able to control that ambient light background and have that lovely black background for this particular shot behind these schooling Antheus. There's actually 2 species of Antheus here. You can see the classic scale fin Antheus, and then in front here you've got, I think this is a Red Sea Antheus with the purple belly. Just let it, sorry, because I moved it, it goes out of focus sometimes. There we go. So you can see the 2, you can see them both in the frame there, the 2 different types of Antheus. And then moving on, this is another reef wide angle shot. This one's not shot with the FCP. This is actually shot with a Nauticam 13mm mechanical fisheye, which I really enjoy shooting as well. I always sort of worry about putting it on that I might miss shots, and then after every dive of using it, I'm really happy to use it. It is a bit awkward to fit because it actually mounts into the Sony lens mount, and it is quite fiddly to do that sometimes. But it works really, really well, and it's a really nice lens to use. I do struggle with the exposure on it a little bit. I don't know whether that's camera related, that the camera doesn't like the mechanical lens, and it's maybe doesn't use its auto gain the same way as it does when it knows what the camera settings are, which is probably why I get confused when shooting the exposures with it. But I do tend to overexpose it and think I'm underexposing it on the dive, and I need to get to the bottom of why that particular lens causes me that particular problem. It's not like massively so. It's just I'm really finicky. I like all my shots to be absolutely perfect out of the camera, and so when they're not, I fuss about it. A macro shot of a sea fan just on the wall at Ras Mohammed. Just a slightly different Red Sea shot. These sea fans aren't very common and very pretty with all the little white polyps. And that brings us back to the beginning again, which was the crocodile fish. So I hope you enjoyed that slightly longer episode. I will be back again, I'm sure, before I go away, because I've got lots more Red Sea stuff to process. I'd say I've got about half of it done now, so there's about another half as much again, so which I'll probably get into a couple more episodes, but I don't know how much I'll get processed before I go away. And then once I've got a whole load of new pictures, the other half will probably never get processed, or won't for a while. Anyway, thank you for listening. I really appreciate the comments you give these videos, and I'll be back again soon with another one.